I'm Chris Merrill. Joe Huizenga sitting to my right. Joining us in studio are ABC15 reporters Nicole Grigg, Ashley Holden, and Melissa Blasius, who have all been following the developing stories in the East Valley over the last, I guess 2 years now, as we talk about the Gilbert Goons, obviously the tragic death of Preston Lord. And we have to wonder, what in the world is going on? How do we address the issue? What are the issues? How do we address those issues? How do we do that from a law enforcement standpoint? How do we do that from a community standpoint? How do we do that from our kitchen tables? And so we want to uncover a little bit of what we've witnessed and then talk about some of the solutions. Our first hour will be dedicated to sort of uncovering the facts. The second hour of our roundtable will be joined by a school administrator. We've also got Donna Bartos, who's the founder of Bloom 365, which is a nonprofit that works with the safety and relationships of kids. And then a licensed therapist is going to join us in that second hour as well, as we sort of dive into the mental aspects of what we're seeing and how we can adjust accordingly. First, welcome to the program, and we appreciate every one of you being a part of this. We'll have an opportunity for each of you to speak whenever you want, and you guys have worked together long enough. You know where each of you are going, so we're very excited to have you here. Let's talk about what I think sort of brought us to this point, the attention that's been paid to violence, youth violence, not necessarily teen violence, but a lot of teens, youth violence in the East Valley, and much of that starts with the Preston Lord case, the young man whose life was tragically taken in Queen Creek at a Halloween party last October. Nicole, you were on this story. You've been following this very, very closely, and I know you were sort of putting pieces together around some of the other violent issues with the Gilbert Goons and then obviously what transpired with Preston Lord. So talk to me a little bit, as you were one of the first there when the Preston Lord tragedy went down. What were your observations, and then what was your gut telling you? Was this different than other stories that you've covered?
Well, keep in mind that the night that Preston Lord was attacked, it was a weekend. So we did not have coverage that night because, quite frankly, we did not know about it. It took a few days. So the first day that I was out there on scene was when it started to get posted on social media, the community. A GoFundMe by Preston Lord's aunt was posted, and that's when we started hearing about this death. So that was on Halloween. I was there on Halloween, knocking on doors, trying to figure out what happened. And that's when we learned about a chaotic party, a party with hundreds of kids where neighbors were calling police. So that was Halloween. Police identified Preston Lord by name the next day, November 1st. We went to a press conference, and that's when we started hearing about this investigation. And once we got confirmed his name, we were able to start digging. What stands out to me is just days after, we were already hearing from the community about the Gilbert Goons, that the Gilbert Goons did this, were a part of it. And so we started asking November 3rd. Okay. About the Gilbert Goons. So that's how early on that this name, this group was coming out.
When you're following the social media, you start putting this together as well. You hear Gilbert Goons, you hear people talking about it. Were you witnessing some of the other videos that had been posted then on social media as you're doing the investigation, and you're starting to put together that, my goodness, we have something trending in this area?
And behind the scenes, we started getting those videos, these fight videos, these very violent, graphic fight videos. And we started asking police. I mean, I can tell you that on November 3rd is when we first reached out to Gilbert police. You know, days later, they denied knowing about the Gilbert Goons, and that they didn't publicly say anything about it until 17 days later that they have an investigation into them. So how is it that the community had been hearing this name? How is it that we were hearing and seeing these videos, that we have tracked back videos as far back as 2022? So the number of videos, I mean, in our station, we had to create an entire whiteboard of faces, names, assaults, and it's still growing. It's still not complete. We still know that there's cases out there.
So what else have we found then about other cases? Are there, as Nicole mentions, there's other cases that may still be out there. I mean, what are we uncovering? Joe and I thought for the longest time that the Preston Lord case happened and that maybe the goons thought we stepped too far and this has gone oh my goodness, now we're scared. Then we find out, no, there were assaults that happened after that related to them. What else have you found with more assaults?
Well, we were having videos sent to us by parents when we were talking to members of the community. They were telling us that at least one person had heard about the Gilbert Goons as early as 2022 after one of their friends' kids was assaulted at In-N-Out. And I've talked to a victim of an assault as early as November 2022. Watching these videos are difficult, and we were having, dozens of them sent to us. We're watching it, we're asking questions, and I think the overall, conclusion that we came to was there is an issue here, right? And when and what did law enforcement know? And those are the questions, some of them have yet to be answered.
To answer your question about teen violence and has it stopped, since arrests have been made. I mean, just a few days ago, last week, we reached out to Gilbert Police, and they were giving us other dates of other teen violence cases, not necessarily connected to the Gilbert Goons, but they're tracking them now. So we have something that happened February 3rd, March 2nd, March 8th, March 23rd. And this is some of the stuff that we have to look into. And, they said we don't have any new arrest updates, investigation into the Gilbert Goons still ongoing. But it shows that there's other teen violence cases still out in the Gilbert area.
So that's something that we want to expand on because I think that is an important point as we talk about the context around what has been the focus, the Gilbert Goons, and then other youth violence circumstances. Talking with Nicole, Greg, Ashley Holden, and Melissa Blasius there from ABC15 is our Youth on Edge roundtable as we try to uncover what's going on with youth violence, not just in the East Valley, but across all of the metro area, and I would even say Arizona at that. Ashley, I want to follow up on something you said. You mentioned the videos that were being sent in, and that people are saying, look, you guys got to see this one, you got to see this one, you got to see this one. I'm assuming that's happening to you. It's happening to all the different news outlets across the valley as well. But one of the things that we have heard about the Gilbert Goons is that they can be vengeful. And some of what has prevented witnesses from coming forward is concern for their own safety or maybe their family's safety. When you were getting those videos, were they being sent in anonymously? Were they being sent in and people asking, don't tell anybody where you got this? How did that transpire? Were there people that were saying, I want to stay in the shadows?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were people. I think that's the thing that really stood out to me as I was going back through when I talked to parents, when I talked to community members, was the level of fear. They were telling me they're fearful of the Gilbert Goons, maybe not for themselves, but for their kids. They're worried that if they speak out about this, their kids are going to get jumped. And I do want to reference one of the cases at In-N-Out. It had 3 victims, according to the police report. 2 of them didn't want to follow through with prosecution because they were still afraid, even as police were talking to them. And they had 1 victim who did want to follow through. But as we're getting those videos, they're from community members, they're from parents. These are parents that were incredibly organized and had gone through social media as well, and we're seeing some of these videos and these fight videos. And I think that's such an important thing to note, was that these videos were being posted to social media. And then you have the question of why are these teenagers sharing these videos to social media? They have to feel like they're getting something out of that. Is it because they want people to see this and they want to feel a certain way, or with each and every view they get something back from that? To me, that's been so hard to grapple with, because when you see some of these videos, you see people standing around recording. And to me, it's just, how is this not this has to be a conversation with your kids, that it's not okay to stand by and record something, do the right thing, step in, stop violence.
And Ashley, I think that's where some of this upstander movement that's come out of the Southeast Valley has come from, is that if you do see somebody attacked or someone bullied, you need to speak up and you need to say something. And some of the parents, I interviewed a mom who was kind of putting up orange ribbons for justice for Preston Lord, and she had been hesitant to do an on-camera interview with us to show her face and her name. And she came to the conclusion, and she told me this when we were talking one-on-one, that she had to stand up and put her face and name on TV so her kids knew that that's what she wanted from them too. It was really a powerful moment because, like, it was, I'm going to show my kids that if there's wrong in the community, that it's my duty to stand up and speak about it and expose it instead of just being afraid and to kind of overcome your own fear for the good of the community.
Chris and I have seen a few of these videos, and what I've seen is, generally a pack of half a dozen kids, a dozen kids savagely beating one or two. You all have seen far more videos than us. Can you describe some of the things that you've seen on video?
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of guns, some pictures of drugs.
Yeah.
What are we talking about when we say videos?
When it comes to the videos, keep in mind, and I don't think that the public truly knows how many videos there are, because we have been going through them, but we can't publicly share a lot of them because we don't know who owns the video. It runs into copyright issues. So we've been very careful on what videos we have released. If we have confirmed they're a part of a police investigation. But yes, I mean, this is very violent. They are very violent videos. One person on the ground trying to protect their head, usually in a fetal position, while people kick, stomp.
Right.
Yeah.
Hit over and I mean, it gives me goosebumps. Just Ashley, you've seen, every single video
and talked to, one of the victims, Dale Jorgensen. He was fine with us sharing his name. He spoke with us and bravely came forward. And he came forward after Preston's attack. He didn't realize that this could be a bigger issue. And so when he saw what was going on in the East Valley, he went to Gilbert Police and reported what happened to him. That's one of the earliest assaults that we've seen in November 2022. He said he was at a house party, had asked some people to leave because it was getting a little too big. And it went from one person swinging on him to, he estimated, 8 people. And that video is hard to watch. And I've had... He had seen one of the videos of his own assault, and I have had other angles of his assault sent to me as well.
How does that reflect back on somebody who witnesses their own beating after the fact?
I mean, I think I asked him, moving forward, how he was feeling. I think he's incredibly strong. It seems like he has, an incredible family unit, but I can imagine how traumatic that would be to see yourself being assaulted. And I think that's why it's so commendable that he came forward and was so brave and not only talking to us, but talking to the police department, wanting, to be a part of the solution and wanting accountability for not only what happened to him, but some of the other victims that were seen as well.
It's our Youth on Edge roundtable at KTAR as we take a look at the issues that surround mental health, the behavioral challenges that are facing our teens and young adults, and we follow some of the incidents of violence and bullying that we've witnessed in the East Valley. Joining us at the roundtable is our ABC15 reporters Nicole Grigg, Ashley Holden, and Melissa Blasius. And Melissa, I wanted to touch on some of the stuff that you were talking about earlier with this issue, the bravery that it takes. And I just sort of wonder, is this something that we're seeing? Is it East Valley? Is it across the valley? Is this an America problem? When we talk about youth violence, we tend to sometimes, I think, get consumed in our own little media bubble of this is the hot story, this is the trending topic that's going on right now. Put this in context for us.
Well, one of the important things I think that we did at ABC 15 is that we actually put out a hotline and an email address where we asked people to give us feedback on our reporting or tips that they had heard or information they wanted. And a surprising number of them actually were people who live in other parts of valleys, parents who are saying, gosh, this teen violence is happening in our community too. You need to come out here and talk about teen violence in my neighborhood. It wasn't just, there's some violence in the Southeast Valley. We heard from one parent whose kid was the victim of a brass knuckles attack in the North Valley. We heard from people in the West Valley. We've heard from people in South Phoenix. We heard from people all over the valley who said, this is a problem in my community too. It's not just Southeast Valley or the Gilbert Goons.
If Preston Lord hadn't been so savagely beaten and ultimately died that night, do you think we'd be here having this discussion today? Would the community have spoken out? We've talked about dozens of videos and things like that. It went on for a long time before this was brought to the attention of, people to try to do something and do something about it.
Well, and I think that the community in Queen Creek and Gilbert in the Southeast Valley, that those community members did something amazing that we rarely see, is that after they weren't getting answers and after they felt so afraid for 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks, they started to go en masse to every meeting they could go to. They went to the city council, they went to the school board, they went to any kind of meeting where they could have their voice heard in not only Chandler, but Gilbert, and Queen Creek, and some of this happened in Mesa as well, and made their voices heard that they wanted answers, they wanted arrests, they wanted police to get to the bottom of it. And as a result, you quickly saw the number of cases that police said they were actively looking at and arrests, and that started to bubble to the top very quickly. And I think that really speaks to the power of the community there to effect change, because these were random attacks on weekends over miles and miles, not all involving the same attackers against the same victims. And unless these folks spoke up in the way they did, I don't know if they ever would have got to the bottom of it.
So as we try to get to the bottom of it, we also want to talk about justice, right? We want to talk about, there's been a lot of pressure, especially on the Gilbert Police Department. In fact, I know that Mesa's got their East Valley Fusion Center, and they said, we've got this entire center set up so that we can share information, and nothing was ever shared with us. What are we seeing now, and what are they doing to improve that system? What do we know that may be coming out from law enforcement in the different areas?
Well, I think that's still some of our questions. We know that there was a big missed opportunity to use the East Valley Fusion Center to talk about the Gilbert goons. So we have the emails of how, Mesa police did not know about it through the Fusion Center. They found out from the press, from the media, from our coverage. So I think that there's still questions. This is taxpayer dollars, the center. What's going to happen with this? Everyone, all these police departments have to buy in to this concept. They have to want to share this information. And sometimes, there's this concept of let's keep this close to home. So maybe other agencies don't know how big a problem might be, is kind of what our reporting has uncovered. And I think that there is more questions. What is the future of the East Valley Fusion Center when, if this is what it should be used for? You would think something this large scale, all hands on deck.
Yeah.
Here.
It feels like either the East Valley Fusion Center starts to work as it should because we learned that it wasn't, or it goes away because it doesn't work. It feels like those are the two directions that it can go. I'm just wondering, as the police forces go, do they get territorial? I mean, is it apathy towards sharing information? What would lead a police force to not share that information? What would lead them to not want to work with neighboring agencies?
Ashley just talked to some former police officers about that topic.
Yeah, and what I was told was, the minute you put it out there, you're putting out your information and that there's a potential problem. Now, when I talked to Gilbert Police, I brought them our questions and said, why not alert the Fusion Center earlier? If you have this tool and you're trying to gather intelligence, why not use it? And they stood by their response. They said that they met in person with numerous agencies later on in December, and that is the way they wanted to do it, and they felt confident in their approach. They felt like by doing that, they were bringing in other agencies that weren't necessarily a part of the Fusion Center. But I think there's still tons of questions there, and I think we're still working with Gilbert Police. I just sent them questions numerous times this week. We're trying to get kind of that timeline that I was talking about in terms of what did they know and when, and how is this investigation, how has it been playing out? They haven't answered a lot of questions about that. We got some new details in Queen Creek's report because they were getting some information from Gilbert. And it seems like they've known some of these things for months. And so we're still trying to get that timeline and really get a good grasp on what they knew. And that investigation into the Gilbert goons has been going on, they told us, since November 20th. And here we are in April. Yeah. So we're still waiting to see what that investigation uncovered.
Yeah, to be honest, it doesn't feel so much like transparency as translucency at this point. We've been talking with ABC15's Nicole Grigg, Ashley Holden, and Melissa Blasius in our Youth on Edge roundtable discussion of youth violence and well-being in the Valley. And Now that you're up to speed on how we got here and what the authorities are coping with, how they're trying to address the issues, what they're doing and areas where they could improve, we're going to take a look at some of the places where we're seeing that uptick. And you may have heard Nicole talk about some of the reports that have just come in here recently, as little as just a week and a half ago. So we want to know what the response is then from the communities. We know that some are getting together. We know that some are standing up and they're being brave and they're saying, I got to set an example for my kids. We'll talk more about those communities and their responses as our Youth on Edge roundtable discussions continues next on KTAR News. Nicole Grigg, Ashley Holden, and Melissa Blasius from ABC15 reporters that have been covering not only the Preston Lord murder investigation as well as the Gilbert Goons assault in the East Valley. Melissa, we just talked as well about so much of everything else we're seeing in other places, whether it's South Phoenix, whether it's West Valley, whether it's North Scottsdale, whatever it might be. We're seeing an awful lot of this. So I wanted to turn to Ashley, if we can, and talk a little bit about the municipalities and their responses. I know at this point it feels reactionary, but I suppose a reaction is better than nothing, right? If we can't prevent it, let's at least prevent it from happening again. So what are we seeing? I know Michael Solberg, the police chief from Gilbert, was just on with Mike Broomhead this morning. He mentioned the Office of Youth Community Engagement will be created with the Gilbert Police Department. What are we seeing from the towns, the town halls, whatever is coming out of the municipal side of this?
Yeah, well, I think everyone's kind of taking a hard look at what can we do. And we've heard from the police departments, it's going to take everyone, right? Parents, municipalities, everyone is condemning violence, really the first step there. But also we're seeing cities like Chandler tomorrow, they're having a work session and they're talking about potentially, if it goes all the way to council and passes, right? But banning the sale and possession of brass knuckles for at least minors. And then also, this is a part of a social ordinance that they're discussing. They're also discussing, parties involving minors. And we're seeing Gilbert has created their subcommittee on teen violence. And they have met multiple times hearing from the community. They're supposed to take their ideas back to city council coming up on April 16th. They have said that they are hoping to turn to a community task force, get community members involved, and they heard so many different ideas. I mean, making sure that kids, even in elementary school, are hearing about going down the right path, possibly interacting with police officers. But that was just one of, many different ideas. And I have been at so many different meetings. We had parents that started showing up, in December as they wanted answers, but they also want solutions. And I was going through some of those videos last night, and Preston Lord's parents have come to some of the meetings, and Nick Lord, Preston's dad, spoke at one, and their big message is they want to be a part of the solution. And I wrote down something he said: if you want to do better, you have to be willing to look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and say, I can do better. And I believe that the cities are doing that. They're looking at themselves and thinking, how can we do better? And they're kind of doing it in their own way.
What kind of responsibility do we see being put on the cities as well? I'm just imagining, we discussed briefly how the Gilbert police may have missed some breadcrumbs along the way. Are there families of victims that are looking to these cities and saying, you dropped the ball on this? Is there a liability on the part of the different municipalities?
I think we're waiting for a lot of the answers. I think there's so much frustration, and there has been. And we're again waiting to hear what did they know and when. But I think some of the focus has also been with those meetings is people are frustrated, and also where do we go from here? Okay. So I know that when Gilbert talked about the Gilbert Goons at one of their press conferences, they said part of the investigation is going back and looking, did they miss anything? Mm-hmm. And so, but we've also talked a lot about, those notice of claims that have been filed by families that I've covered as well. I mean, there's a lot of frustration there. And some of those parents really do feel like Gilbert police and school districts majorly dropped the ball.
Nicole, Greg, Ashley Holden, and Melissa Blasius joining us from ABC 15. It's our Youth on Edge roundtable discussion of the different violent episodes that we've seen that have transpired not only in the East Valley, but also in other places around the Phoenix metro area. And so let me turn to you, Melissa, because I know you've got a history not just in television. You've also got a breadth of education working with the Arizona DHS at some point, if I got my notes on you correct here.
That's right. I worked for the state health department for a while in communications.
So you've seen some of the anti-bullying campaigns. Does that feel at times like an uphill battle? Like, my goodness, we have worked so hard on these things, and then we see bullying. Then we see attacks with brass knuckles and an In-N-Out burger. How does it feel like those campaigns are working? Are they effective? And what can we be doing to push them even further?
I think there's a lot of effectiveness in making families aware and making school districts aware. We know the vast majority of teens who are bullied do not report that they've been bullied. And so some of our responsibilities as adults and community members is to talk to our kids, talk to the children that you know. Create that open communication. Ask them if they're being bullied. Ask them what's going on. Know the signs of bullying so that you can actually help them. So be aware so you can help. And then if you find out a child's been bullied, then you can take it to the school district or your school resource officer or the police or to the other parents. You can actually take action.
So are you learning that those campaigns, because what I'm hearing almost sounds like parents take away more from them and it raises awareness with other leaders, other parents than it actually does with the kids?
I think it does, and there's also some, many campaigns that are directed directly at kids that it is okay to speak up, and it's okay if you witness someone being bullied to tell, because I think that's a lot of times like the kids not only being bullied, but other kids are witnessing them being bullied, and they're not saying anything either, and so that's kind of like come up and help that person.
You mentioned earlier, was it the upstanding movement or the stand-up movement, whatever it was, right?
Upstander.
Upstander movement. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that was, I suppose, in direct response to what we've seen with the crowds, the throngs of kids who are recording for social media clout.
Yeah.
Rather than stepping in.
This movement has been, a movement by the East Valley community, and they want people to be upstanders, and that's their big message is, speak up, say something. If you see something like this, be an upstander. And I think that goes back to kind of what I was talking about. Talk to your kids about if you see someone being assaulted, if in the moment you don't feel safe, speak up, tell an adult, feel comfortable telling an adult. I think also I've talked to a lot of people about social media. Social media has changed so much since when I was in high school. I would say we barely had the social media that we had today when I was in high school. I can't imagine being a teenager and having all of these different forms of communication. But I think it's tough to understand all of the different apps that kids have access to. But as a parent, it's good to start learning that and talk to your kids about what they're using and have that open dialogue. So I think that's another really important thing to talk about and look at.
Ashley, just listening to you say that is exhausting.
I know.
I mean, as a parent,
it's tough.
It is so hard.
It's tough for me, and I'll be open and say I'm not a parent, but in our jobs we have to keep up with social media, and we've seen TikTok and things since I've gotten into this field. Yes,
Insta, yeah.
And it's hard to know what apps do what and what you can do on them. And so I think it's important to learn to talk to your kids. And I know that's exhausting for parents, and that's hard. That's difficult.
Very difficult. The roundtable discussion on youth violence and well-being in the Valley continues. Their ABC 15 reporters. We hear what the parents, the students, and the neighbors are saying and what worries them the most. And I have a feeling we'll expand a little bit more on the social media as well. That is next in our Youth on Edge roundtable. Hosted by my partner, Joe Huizenga, and myself, Chris Merrill, KTAR News. Chris Merrill, Joe Huizenga, hosting our Youth on Edge roundtable. Joining us at the roundtable is Nicole Grigg, Ashley Holden, and Melissa Blasius from ABC 15 as we talk about some of the issues that we've seen around not only East Valley, but of course it happens all across the Phoenix metro area. A specific spotlight has been shown on East Valley, I think in large part because of some of the social media that has been associated with the violence that we've seen, with the bullying, with the beatings, and of course with the death of Preston Lord, which was captured on somebody's cell phone, which was wild. Ashley, you mentioned some of what Chandler is looking at. They've got social ordinances they're going to consider and brass knuckle ordinances as well. We know that those weapons have been used in some various assaults. When you talk about the social ordinances, does that involve or does that encompass social hosting, these parties where parents are providing alcohol for minors and they think that they're providing a safer atmosphere? Does it address that?
Well, and I was looking up their presentation because this is so new. We found out about this. They're going to talk about it tomorrow. So hopefully we'll be able to get some more information. But their presentation talks about unlawful, unruly gatherings. And part of this, examples are impeding traffic, obstruction of streets by crowds or vehicles, possession of illegal drugs, drinking and alcohol in public areas. And it also says, service of alcohol to minors. Some of this that I think is coming up and why it's so important is we've talked about first responders the night Preston was attacked had a difficult time getting to the scene because there were so many cars parked there. And we know that there were a couple of parties that happened that night, and the one that Preston was at, it was actually sent out and advertised on Snapchat. So many people flocking to these Halloween parties. And I think that's part of the reason why cities are taking a look at that. How can they make kids safer? This is possibly one of the ways, and that's what they're going to talk about.
Well, police had been out there that night too. About an hour before, 45 minutes before, and we've heard about reports of kids throwing up in bushes, jumping fences, but the police said we didn't see anything illegal that was going on.
That's very true. I mean, at the very first press conference, that was the question I had was, what do you mean you didn't see anything? By every neighbor account, people had open alcohol. That's a crime. They're underage. You had people throwing up. Mm-hmm. You had it was chaotic. And so, Queen Creek Police said that they were dispatched to another call, a high priority call, I believe a domestic violence call, and then that's what happened from there.
So let me shift then to Melissa, because I'm really curious about your perspective, and I'm going to also ask you to put words in the mouth of your teenager, if you don't mind. You have a unique perspective in that you are the parent of a 14-year-old right now. What are you hearing from your 14-year-old? Because obviously you're witnessing this as a reporter, but also you've got a personal stake in the youth in that exact demographic.
Sure. 14 next month. And, he's concerned about issues of bullying. He really is. He's witnessed fights or heard about fights with other kids his age. We know other families whose kids have been hit and injured. And so there's a lot of concern about how do you help the kids either not be bullied or stop the bullying or in those kinds of things. So that is a huge issue with my son, his friends, the other parents that we know.
How do you monitor his social media? As Ashley was pointing out, keeping up with social media is very difficult. Oh, you gave me the side eye, like there's no social media. So how are you monitoring that, and what are your plans then?
Well, so we do not allow him to have an account on most of the social media platforms. And I can't reveal all of my mom's secrets because he could hear this back.
Okay.
But we do talk to him frequently. We do keep an eye on what he's doing.
What do you hear back from him? Is it, all my friends have it, Mom, why can't I? Or does he understand and respect, Mom and Dad's wishes?
He does. He's a great kid. My kid's a great
Good.
kid. And lots of these kids who've been kind of dragged into the wider variety of issues that we've been talking about are good kids. Mm-hmm. And so it's, when you talk about accountability, there's a lot of accountability that we've been talking about: police and cities and government and laws and schools and school resource officers. But it's also, about parents being accountable for their own kids.
What have you learned from him? As you're a reporter, you have to be frontward facing and talk about all of this. Are there things that you come home at night and you have a conversation with him that you're like, wow, that is fascinating, as it pertains to an issue like teen violence and what's going on in schools?
So, luckily we able to keep him kind of out of some of these discussions, but
Mm-hmm.
I asked him last night about the Gilbert Goons and what he thought about what was going on and what he'd seen, right? So maybe that's an in for parents, is say, like, bring it up. Like, this has been on the news. What are you seeing in your school? What are you seeing with your friends? How can we be better as parents? And I think that's what a lot of these communities are asking too. And I talked to Queen Creek Mayor Julia Wheatley at one point, and she's creating a teen advisory committee, because what they've learned there is they really need to hear more directly from the kids about what they need, and then provide the services that the kids want, that they're going to use, that they need.
I think that's the biggest takeaway from what we've talked about today. Nicole Grigg, Ashley Holden, and Melissa Blasius, it has been an honor to have you in here talking about this. We commend you for the hard work that you have all put into tracking these stories, to putting the puzzle pieces together, and to keeping us informed, and offering that opening for us to be able to talk about these things with our own kids. We appreciate you. Now that you've had a chance to hear what the reporters have seen, what law enforcement is doing, and what the parents think should be done, we're going to invite some of those stakeholders to discuss solutions. How to make things better next on the Youth on the Edge Roundtable with Chris Merrill and Joe Huizenga, KTAR News. Joining us now as we've cycled our reporters out and brought in some experts, including James Meehan, who's the charter holder of Accelerated Learning Center, Donna Bartos, who's the founder of Bloom 365. It's a nonprofit in Peoria focusing on the safe and healthy relationships, the healing and the well-being for this generation of youth and the next, and Michael Klinkner, who is a licensed therapist, deals with bullying, social media, and does individual, group, and family therapy for children, for adolescents, and adults. You guys really are the brain trust that we brought in to make us a little bit smarter. We appreciate you being here. I'm just going to toss this out and let you guys sort of bandy about at this if we can. And I want to start with James. James, you, as the charter holder of the Accelerated Learning Center, and this is a high school, and you've got kids within that high school that have had some challenges growing up. What is it that you're seeing now? And then can you compare that to, say, pre-pandemic, or what we've witnessed as far as, kids in 2018 versus 6 years later, which doesn't sound like much, but my God, it feels like a whole generational gap now.
Yeah, you're right. Our schools are specialized in serving students that are, considered at risk, right? That aren't finding success in the traditional school model. And, really what we're seeing now is this desire or preference for isolation, right? We had this extended time period where kids were working online, and they got to a point to where they preferred that. Which is concerning, because we all know that as human beings, the power and the benefit of community, being in a positive, healthy community, but they want to withdraw from that. So keeping them engaged and motivated to stay in the community where they can be best served is honestly a big part of our job these days. The other thing that we really uncovered, and we did this through a statewide teen re-engagement effort that we ran with Governor Ducey with our company called Elevated Education, was we partnered with Reeser Advertising that has a strategic research division, and we did surveys and focus groups of parents of students who are at risk and students themselves. Over 1,000 participants in that, and we asked the parents, how much time does your student spend on their phone a day, right? And they said 3 to 4 hours. The students answered that same question, and it was 8 to 9 hours a day. That has to be part of this conversation in why they want to be isolated, and what's driving some of their behavior is this just constant draw to a device.
Let me shift over to Donna Bartos, the founder of Bloom 365. You deal with kids, and you obviously are taking a look at the mental health of this generation. The isolation that James is talking about there, something that you're witnessing as well, and do the phones contribute to that, current state of, youth mental health?
Well, if I was a teen in this seat answering that question, it would be no, because that's how we connect with each other, and that's our norm for connection. But as a parent seeing this happen, it's why aren't you talking face to face? Why aren't you going out and hanging out with your friends? And I think it's important to point that isolation piece as a risk factor for these adverse behaviors and experiences that students are having, because on the flip, a protective factor, or the thing in our work with violence prevention that every kid and young person and teen needs, is social connectedness and positive peer relationships. So if that's absent from their lives, that elevates the risk for these harmful behaviors to others or to self, and then just elevates that isolation piece.
Let me shift over here then to Michael, who's you offer therapy to families and to kids and adolescents. To Donna's point, if we were to ask the kids, they'd say, no, that is my social outlet. So how does isolation translate then as a risk? If they're getting social connections, they're just different than what we grew up in. Is it a risk, or is that an adult interpreting the next generation as just being different and then therefore assigning it as risky behavior?
There's a couple key points to this. The first is recent research is showing about 60% of teens admit that when they put their phones away, they don't have access to them for extended periods of time. They feel more calm. They notice their anxiety goes down. They feel better. And so they're going to say, is that how they connect? Yes. They also know that they're better without their phones. Just purely through social media, through the scrolling through TikTok, seeing all the memes, seeing all like the FOMO and the perceived pressures about how they're supposed to look and how they're supposed to be. When that's put aside, that's very helpful. We have seen an increase in things like self-harm, eating disorders, body dysmorphia, directly related to social media and the filtered pictures. And so everybody knows they're filtered, but for a teen brain, it's very hard to interpret, okay, I know it's filtered, but I want to look that way anyway. So they're striving for those perfect bodies. They're striving to look or appear a certain way using their own filters. But for the teen, it's never good enough. What they're doing is never good enough. They're never popular enough. They're not getting enough likes, and the picture isn't ever okay.
How does that different? Obviously, it's a different playing field. Mm-hmm. But is the game different than it was for us when we were teenagers? Because, my God, I wanted my peer group to like me. I was afraid of rejection. I had those stresses. And to be honest with you, don't tell my parents this, but when I was growing up, probably after I spent a little bit of time with them, they seemed like normal human beings. Of course, when I sit down to dinner, they were monsters. And you know how it is when you're a teenager. But I would say that getting a breather from my peer group in general probably was healthy for me at that time, too. Does this shine as particularly different than normal teen challenges?
Yes, because there is no break. You're always worried about social media. You're always worried about if I've posted something, how many views have I gotten, how many likes. And so as we were growing up, I'm a Gen Xer, and so do my peers like me? Yeah. How do I know? By how much we hang out, and like, do we call each other on the shared family phone, and all of those things. Do my peers like me? Yeah, I think so. There's now an objective way that they're looking to determine if they are popular enough. Number of likes, number of followers, number of people that have shared their reposts, things like that. And if you have an objective way, it's just so hard because it's never good enough. It's never enough. And so it's just a constant state of impacting self-esteem based on perceived what my numbers should be like, especially as I compare it to other people in my grade at the same school, how many followers they have, what they're posting, and then how on earth am I supposed to keep up? There isn't a break from it. Their phone is always with them. We just heard 8 or 9 hours a day. That's a full-time job that they're spending looking at what they think they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to perform socially. Quoty finger socially.
We're in the middle of our roundtable right now. Youth on Edge is the series we're focused on teen violence, youth mental health. We're joined by Michael Klinkner, who you just heard, who's a licensed therapist here in the Valley, Donna Bartos, founder of Bloom 365, and James Meehan, who is a charter holder here in the Valley at Accelerated Learning Center. You mentioned social media, the cell phone right here, that they're huge problems. What other problems do you three, Donna, we'll start with you. If it's not the cell phone, if it's not social media, what other problems present themselves to teens and youngsters these days that you encounter with everything that you do at Bloom 365?
Yeah, thank you for that question. In our lane of work of violence prevention, there are certain ongoing common risk factors that teens and young people face in their lives that put them more at risk for these harmful behaviors. Again, it could be violence perpetration, verbal, emotional, physical, sexual violence, bullying, etc. Or it could be substance misuse or suicidal ideation, which is we know is a mental health disease and disorder that many young people face. But kind of tagging back to the social media piece, yes, the constant looking, am I fitting in? Am I missing out? Am I up to par with what these expectations are that seem unrealistic? Chips away at a young person's self-esteem for that young person that does not have good coping skills, that does not have good protective factors in their lives to counteract that challenge and that risk. So not only does social media have an impact on some students with their self-esteem, but also thinking about what is going on in their environment. In our world, we don't use the word troubled youth. There's no such thing as a troubled youth. It's the environment in the world around them that's troubled, and how does that environment influence how they feel about themselves, and more importantly, how they're showing up in the world or not showing up in the world. So we think about trauma at home, instability at home, lack of confidence because maybe they don't have a skill that they've mastered, but maybe their peers do. Pressure to succeed academically, and maybe their brain just doesn't function that way, but the people in their world don't recognize I don't learn that way, but we're expected to get the grade. So there's so many factors that deplete a young person's self-esteem beyond social media.
And Donna, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking about all the ways that parents may be trying to cope with that, but also how the schools are trying to cope with that. So, James, what adjustments are being made? Again, with the Accelerated Learning Center, and you deal with at-risk youth with many of your education resources. What adjustments are they making right now as we're finding out? We're evolving. Technology is evolving, and it's evolving our social patterns.
Yeah, so that's one beautiful thing about the Arizona educational environment of school choices. There are options outside of what's traditional, because what we're seeing is a square peg and round hole situation, right? Everybody wants education to fit in this nice rubric and it be very streamlined and easy to measure. But, with the challenges that a lot of these teens are facing, it doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. There's too many unique things and supports that these students need that the schools can step up to offer. But, that's challenging for a huge traditional school, and kind of the beauty of a nimble charter school that can step into some of these specialized demographics.
What do you say to the parents that say, look, I appreciate that you're nimble and I appreciate that you can adjust things for my student, but I just want to know if they're getting an A or a D. As you point out, that may not be the rubric that we need to use for measurement. How do you talk with the parents in these circumstances?
Yeah, for us, we're more focused on progress, right?
Okay.
We're not expecting perfection. Are they growing from point A to point B? Are they earning the credits that they need to earn? Are they persisting in their academics, meaning are they staying in it and not dropping in and out of school like is some of the case?
How do you handle phones at the Accelerated Learning Center? You mentioned, and I think this is critical, parents think, hey, my kid only has this in their hands 3 to 4 hours a day. Kids are saying, it's actually more than twice that amount. How do you handle it? Are they allowed to have them in the classroom? Are they allowed to have them on them at school? And what does the access look like when they're trying to learn?
Yeah. Having them show up and lock them into a locker or in the administrative offices is chaos. We've tried it. It doesn't work. What we do is we approach it with a very structured day when they know exactly when they're going to be able to access their device. We have times that we are working and we're focused, and we have times where we're socializing and can be on devices.
Joining us right now in our roundtable discussion here on Youth on Edge is James Meehan, from whom you just heard, our charter holder of Accelerated Learning Center, Donna Bartos, the founder of Bloom 365, who deal with the young people of this generation and the next, and the importance of teens and the relationships with their mental health as well. And then on that track of mental health, Michael Klinkner, who is a licensed therapist as well, works with families, with individuals, with groups for kids, adolescents, and adults. I'm thinking about all of what you guys are saying, and I'm thinking about back to when I was a teenager, and why. Now I've got my kids are in their 20s now. Thank God, I'm done with that. Why is it so hard for me, an adult, to understand what they're facing? Because I was a teenager once, and this is why, Michael, I was asking you a little bit about, is it really that much different? How can I be empathetic and understand their perspective as an adult who's gone through it? And I know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but it's different when you're a teenager. Why am I not understanding that?
Well, we need to understand parents now, we're essentially technology immigrants. It's the same idea of when, like, our grandparents came over to Ellis Island, brand new culture, brand new language. We had no idea of, like, what was going on or how to navigate those things. That is the same for us as parents now. I have no frame of reference what it's like to be a 15-year-old growing up with social media being that important. I know that I don't know. So I always, like, to my parents that I'm working with, I'm always, like, importing the ideas of just be empathetic, ask a lot of questions, validate their experience. And that part ends up being really important because bullying can show up in so many little weird ways where, like, if someone likes my friend's post but not mine, or, like, shares someone else's, that's not going to mean anything to me. To my teens, that's their world, and it couldn't be any more important. So just validate that even if you don't understand it, and then get really curious. Ask a lot of really open-ended questions about why is that such a big deal, or talk to me about what is it about that that's hurting your feelings, or what are your friends going through with their Snapchats. Just ask all those questions and let your child educate you about those things, and just know that you don't know, and it's okay.
I love the advice, and I can't get out of my head the image of the after-school specials from when we were younger, right? Hey, Michael, how's it going at school today?
Dun, 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 dun.
Right, yes, right? And so I can't help but to wonder, like, Donna, how do we have those conversations and make them seem natural? Like, as I'm making dinner, my kid doesn't want to talk to me because they're on their phone, right?
Or they're in their room.
Sure.
Yeah,
so,
on the phone.
Although, there's an
yes.
elephant in the room here to
Okay.
stretch this to the next level.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you both a question.
Okay.
What stereotypes about teens do you maintain in your mind every day? What labels or things that you think about teens because they're a teen?
Because they're a teen. And I think this is a generational thing that I find difficult. Joe's the worst at it. He cranks out the kids these days all the time.
Not that exact language, but yeah, no, I do. I just threw one of them out there that kids want to be on their phone all the time. They want to be in their room. They don't want to be outside and run around and hang out with other kids. They want to be, we talked about it a little bit, isolated. They want to be with all their friends, but on their own.
And they know that you think that. So what's
Okay.
your stereotyte?
Distracted. Right,
Okay.
that's the way I always think of it, and I think I've got a failure to launch 20-year-old too at home, 25, who feels distracted. Priorities are out of whack. He's not really focused on things that I think other 25-year-olds should be focused on. So I feel like it's distracted. Like priorities aren't necessarily arranged correctly, and frankly, I feel like that's my fault.
So distracted, failure to launch, isolated. Teens know what the adults around them are saying and thinking about them.
Okay.
That puts up a barrier for them to come to you in a way thinking that they're going to get an empathetic response. This adultism thing, as parents and as adults, we think in our mind, our job, and I'm talking about teens, I'm not talking about 5-6 years old.
Yeah,
It's a different
Yeah.
growth development. In our minds, our job is to protect, to take care of, to provide for, and to fix their problems. When they're a teen, they're in that funky stage of life where empowerment and autonomy and decision-making is important to start practicing and forming. But if they know when they come to the trusted adult or parent in their life, and the response that they're going to get is, well, why did you wait to tell me? Well, why did you show up in that way? Well, why did you get yourself into that situation? We're judging. And then we're giving our opinion when they haven't asked for it. And then we're giving advice. And then the advice that I got, Well, when I was your age, I walked to school without shoes. So I'm going to minimize that experience because I can't relate. I don't have that same experience. And try walking to school without shoes. That's what I got. And then as parents, we're trying to nudge them to do what we want them to do. And I've created a training within our organization similar to what you had shared, Michael, about how you show up. It's called the Level Response Training. And it's created for natural helpers, parents, guardians, caregivers, teachers, mentors, coaches, friends, peers, neighbors, whomever. And it trains everyday people who are not the experts like we are in this, how to listen actively and reflectively, how to empathize and put that little judgment and stereotype thing aside, how to validate their experiences in a way that you're not minimizing their experience, denying that it happened, or blaming them for it happening. How do you encourage them to improve their well-being? And for us, we measure well-being in 5 points: self-esteem, safety, social connectedness, skill building. And then the final of that is kind of looking overall at self-esteem and self-care and all those things that every young person should have the skills to do. The final part, which I'm finding is most hard for parents and caregivers and adults, is linked to resources. Because as a parent, our job, we think, is to fix. And sometimes we think that means we're the expert in the lives of our kids. But if they're struggling with these very deep root causes and risk factors, it's okay to make that connection to an expert that can help. But that's a huge barrier, and not just culturally, but across the board.
What I hear you saying, too, is let kids be kids, and we can reprogram mom and dad a little bit.
Yeah.
So but if your kid is having a challenge, though, what do you do to get them that help? Can you touch on that briefly? Like, what are some of the things that the kids need to change?
I'm going to pause.
Chris is going to call time out.
I'm going to call time out here. Yeah, we're going to. That's a great tease. We're going to answer that question here in just a few moments. We've been identifying and diagnosing some of the root causes, and I think those are the keys to understanding some of the issues that we've seen with the influx of youth violence on the front pages here of the last couple of years. Next, a focus not only on the question Joe just asked, but also on how to address those root causes and then find solutions to this fear that really has gripped Central Arizona for the last year or more. It's Youth on Edge. Our roundtable continues with Michael Klinkner, our licensed therapist, Donna Bartos, the founder of Bloom 365, and James Meehan, who's the charter holder of the Accelerated Learning Center. That is next on KTAR News. I'm Chris Merrill. Joe Huizenga sitting to my right in studio with us as part of our roundtable. James Meehan, who's the charter holder of Accelerated Learning Center. Next to him, Michael Klinkner, who is our licensed therapist. He does individual, group, family therapy for children, adolescents, and adults. And also Donna Bartos, the founder of Bloom 365, which is a nonprofit based in Peoria that deals with the safety and the healthy relationships, healing, and the well-being for this generation and the next. I'm going to key in on something, Donna, you said before we went to news, and that is you were talking about parenting and how to parent a little bit different and listening to what our kids are saying, not necessarily adulting. And if we don't have the answers, we should go find the answers or don't be afraid to reach out to certain resources. I guess twofold. The first is, how is that different than the old criticism of you're trying to be your kid's friend, not their parent? And then we'll follow up with what are some of the resources and what do we find that parents have as far as tools maybe they don't know are available.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, because I grew up with parents who are my parents and not my friends. So that's all I knew. But when we think about asking parents to think about showing up with empathy, trying to truly put themselves in the shoes of their child, especially their teen, and come from a place of just being connected and being in that moment with them, does not mean be their BFF and go out and do shots with them or do the things that we know considered like, oh, I'm gonna be on their level and I'm gonna dress like them and chat like them and Snapchat like them.
To your point, I think we can all say we've witnessed some of that when we talk about some of the violent episodes that have happened in the East Valley. I think we've seen some of that, social hosting and things of that nature. I think some
to be
of that
the cool parent.
Yeah.
Having a level response as a parent is not about being a cool parent. It's about learning how to merge empathy with accountability and understand that our role as parents, is to protect young people, but it's also to equip them with resilience. And when we show them and model to them how to show up and support in hard situations when they're going through it, they're going to be better equipped to do that not only with their peers, because we know in our line of work, when it comes to violence and violence disclosures of dating violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, peer-on-peer violence, 80% of students are going to tell their friend before they go to their adult or go to their parent. And then if they go to their parent with this and the parent flips out or blames them or starts like going off the rails, that's probably going to shut that kid down. So a level response is not about being BFFs with your teen child. It's about showing them how to model to them that you are actually listening. Y'all probably been there. I've been there too, where I'm working or doing something and my kid comes up to me and they're like, "Mom, da 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 da." I'm like, "Uh-huh. Mom, what did I just say?" "Oh, I'm so sorry."
Oh, that's
I
Joe
still do
every
that to
day.
Chris.
And then-
At
but-
least in his eyes.
but if
I tell him
that's-
I listen with my ears.
Yeah. If that's consistent, what are you saying to your kid? This, what I'm working on right now, is more important than what you're so excited to tell me or that what you're going through. So it's really about that kind of active listening and reflective listening and showing up with empathy, validating their experience, encouraging them to boost that well-being. And if you are not the expert and feel like you need help, not being ashamed to ask for that expert help.
We're talking with Donna Bartos. She's the founder of Bloom 365. They're a Peoria nonprofit that focuses on safety and healthy relationships. James Meehan, charter holder of the Accelerated Learning Center, and Michael Klinkner, who is a licensed clinical social worker. And right before we went to break, Donna, I was asking you, and you were talking about, I'll dumb it down into my language, how to kind of reprogram mom and dad and parents and adults in the room. What can we do specifically with children, though? So if step one is, hey, mom and dad, you need to look at this situation differently. Is there a way to do something similar with kids to help them feel less pressure? How do we get through to them? If step one is mom and dad, how do you then, if you are a kid, what can you do to take some of the pressure off their plate as a kid themselves?
Yeah, well, there are probably going to be some parents who disagree with this response.
Good.
And this is an elephant in the room because I've come under attack for this. Not only, it's not my personal view or opinion, this is what research says. When we're talking about peer-to-peer, teen to teen, kid to kid, it is so important that we not only expect that what's going on at home is respectful and healthy because that's what's going to have kids show up at school being respectful and healthy and ready to learn. But peer influence is so strong. How many hours a week do students spend with each other on campus if they're out of campus and then online when they're off campus? So part of the work that we do is we educate and we train peers as influencers and advocates with each other on not only how to model these behaviors, but how to band together when the stuff starts to go down. Because if you're the only upstander in a room of 10, 20, 30 people, and you see things going on, harmful behaviors that you don't agree with, it's going to be very difficult for you to have the courage to step in and either distract the situation, directly do something, delegate it to someone else, because you're not going to delegate it to an adult because then you're going to be the snitch, the only one.
Chris has specifically brought this up as it pertained to the Gilbert Goons. We talked about all of the filming that would go on with the
Yeah.
fights. And Chris, you asked all the time, the way I break it down is like, hey, where are the heroes here? Where are the good
The
boys and girls?
upstanders is what they're calling it now.
The upstanders are under this umbrella of such power and control from those who have it in that moment. You freeze. It's very difficult to step in when you know, if I'm the only one stepping in, who's going to follow me? And to take that risk and be the first one to step in is a very difficult place for teens specifically to be in, because then they become a target. They know it's the right thing to do, but then they're like, do I want that to be my fate? And some truly are like, I can't even believe what I'm seeing here, that this is going on.
So, Michael, is that sort of a fight or flight? Like, do I stand up or do I just stay back because it's safer?
I think there's two parts to it because you're right. And so in those moments when they're watching something terrible happen, they're going to be in like a fight or flight or freeze mode. And so you don't necessarily have control which of those you go into. It's happening. It's an adrenaline response. It's just your brain's and then your body's therefore response. And so therefore it's scary. Can I do something? Maybe, maybe not. And so in those moments though, you can do some prep or training for it. And so then with the Gilbert Goons thing and so much of like the violence that's been around, parents can have those conversations with their teens about, if you're around something like that, what would you do? I work with parents all the time about if your kid's going to be going to parties, we just talked about this a lot recently over spring break things. If your kids are going to be going to parties and it starts to go awry, what are you going to do? When you start to feel like it's getting to be like one of those parties, how do you get out of there? What happens if your driver, who is supposed to be designated, isn't designated anymore? Those sort of things. And you have to prep them for that. And you, as Donna was saying, you have to have those conversations before in order to build that resilience, to have those coping skills in place, to be able to handle it when it comes up. The other part with the filming thing, too, I did want to make sure to mention is we adults keep getting very critical of all those kids that were just filming and didn't do anything. We need to ask questions about how much we've modeled that exact behavior by the constant filming of your children. Everything they do is documented. You are not involved in their recitals. You're not involved in those from like very early ages when they're on their bikes. You're posting and filming all of those things. You're not present either. And you're modeling for your kids not to be present in those situations. You're modeling like, oh, this is a big deal. I have to film it and I have to post it. Where do you think your kids are going to pick that up from? And so for all of those parents that are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did it, and you're posting everything about your kids' lives all the time, you have to start with yourself first. You have to be self-reflective about what you've modeled for your kids to never be to be present in a moment, but to be film a moment and then get admiration for how you filmed it.
All right, whether it's home life, school life, pandemic, stunting, maturation, social circles, social media, what young people deal with today sometimes feels foreign to the older generations, as Michael was just pointing out. Sometimes we might be part of the problem. A recap of what we've learned and how we can all better understand one another is next as we wrap up our Youth on Edge roundtable discussion on KTAR News. Chris Merrill, Joe Huizenga, and as we wrap up our roundtable here, joined by James Meehan, who's the charter holder of Accelerated Learning Center, Donna Bartos, founder of Bloom 365, who focuses on teens and the relationships with mental health, and Michael Klinkner, who is a licensed therapist, and he does therapy for individuals, groups, and families as well. James, we were just talking about parents, their involvement, what parents can do, behavior modification, showing the mirrors on themselves, that sort of thing. But as Donna was talking about that in the last segment, it struck me that, boy, that is really easy to create this ideal profile of what the family looks like. But that's not what all your students have. They don't have the family where the kids come home and mom is making dinner for them and they can discuss, what was the funny thing you saw at school today? Sometimes they go home and mom is passed out on the couch. Mm-hmm. Sometimes dad comes home and he says, get me a beer, and maybe his form of affection is not what we would consider to be a beaver cleaver type affection. So when we've got parental non-involvement, I know there's a lot of pressure on the schools to step up and fill that void. What is it that you have found works within the school structure to do that?
Yeah. You know, we do a lot of professional development on this, and one of the things that we tell our staff is you're not expected to be mom and dad. That's too big of an expectation. But we do want to support and love our students, because one of the things that we know when they show up to our schools for the first time is there's a lack of hope and a lack of possibility, that they just don't see that within them because they've been told their whole life that they're dumb, or that, they've been kicked out of every school that they've been in, right? So here comes another school. So we're very intentional about making sure our schools don't look and feel like the typical school, right? Because that'll just cause a reaction as soon as they walk in there. And one of the first things we do is every student that comes into our schools is assigned a mentor. And that mentor's job is to help them along the path academically. Every student actually gets an individualized learning plan that's a roadmap to graduation. But we're also working with them on identifying the risk factors or the barriers in their life that have gotten in the way of their education in the past and helping them overcome those. So that's kind of those wraparound services. And then also character development on, helping these students become good citizens once they leave our school. They're walking away with a diploma and they are actively engaging their local communities. And that, it's to the point where kids are showing up for that healthy adult relationship. Them doing algebra is a byproduct of that relationship. They're not showing up for algebra.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's a complete mindset change from generations past. I think reading, writing, arithmetic, and the rest of it will follow. And what you're telling me is let's fix some of the underlying issues.
Yeah, for us, the basis of everything we do is mentoring, right?
Okay.
We want to care for that person first, and the educational progress is a byproduct. of the proper support.
Michael Klinkner is our licensed therapist. And Michael, I've got a short amount of time left here. You've got a family comes to you and says, I'm trying to figure out how to talk to my kid. My kid is getting into trouble at school. What's the first thing that you start with? What's the first thing that you focus on? I mean, is it social media? Is it understanding? Is it learning? Is it going to where do you start?
We call it positive label praise. And so how many times a day do you find something to praise your kid about, even if it's the things that they're supposed to be doing or should be doing? Like they sat down to do their homework when they're supposed to. That is praiseworthy. When they do their chore like they're supposed to, that is praiseworthy. That is, for a kid, for a teen, that's their payment. Even if they're getting allowance, praise from their parent about those things creates dopamine in your brain. Your dopamine makes you more likely to do that behavior in the future. Praise from a parent's a big deal. And so when I hear parents saying, I can't talk to my kid, there's so much resistance, I'm looking for how much is the parent looking to just criticize all the time? How much are they telling their kid they're doing something wrong? And then opposite of that, how much are you praising your kids? And so if I can get that shifted, we're always looking for about a 3-to-1 ratio for positive label praise to criticism. If we can get that in place, behavior changes fairly quickly. Also, a parent mindset about their kid and how much they're screwing up and all the things they don't do also shifts, because now I have to find 3 things a day to compliment my kid about, which is like such a pain. But they'll find it, and they're going to get a state of mind shift, and the kid's going to feel it, because now it's not all about what I'm doing wrong. It's about what I'm doing right.
Sure. And like you said, it sort of shifts the parent's mindset as well. I suppose it's the cognitive shift that we have going on. Gang, we're out of time. I think we could probably do another 3 hours between us here. There's no trouble with that. It's been a wonderfully enlightening hour in our Youth on Edge roundtable with Michael Klinkner, Donna Bartos, the founder of Bloom 365, and James Meehan, the charter holder of Accelerated Learning Center. Guys, it's been an absolute honor to have you into the studio today. Thank you so much. We look forward to talking to each of you again in future segments. All right, the roundtable discussion comes to a close. Joe and I are going to continue to dive into what we've taken away from our talking with the guests over the last couple of hours, and then try to put into context what youth see today and why that's so important and why the context is so often misunderstood. I've learned a few things today as well that sort of are going to feed into that discussion. That's next. The Chris and Joe Show starts just after our 2 o'clock news, KTAR News.
A KTAR News special series of reports, Youth on Edge.